Well then, I do believe everything's starting to work properly, and I'm not 100% certain but we're going, but it seems as though we have gotten liftoff. Finally. I have to admit, this has been a troubling and difficult time. I'm hoping to edit all this out if I don't get too lazy, but let me just sit back, relax, and introduce you to my perspective on old Doctor Who. Now, I originally didn't start watching Doctor Who until about 2010, so well past the original cutoff date for getting directly involved in the Doctor Who series, which started in the new one anyway, and started in 2005, and well beyond the ability to watch the initial episode on live TV. Trust me, I wasn't alive back then. Anyway, I didn't really get too involved into it, but I have come to enjoy and really love the new series of Doctor Who. I do have my own plans and stuff like that, but overall I think it's an extremely good amount of TV, considering most of what is on TV these days is bullocks or crap in any way, shape, or form. So, I watched quite a bit of it, and, I decided to eventually go back and felt it was my responsibility as a Whovian to watch the original series. And boy, did that take me a while to get through that. I have to admit, I was not expecting them to be so dang long. Recently managed to get myself to Patrick, the second Doctor, and I decided I was going to talk a little bit about my experiences while watching through William Hartnell era, since he was the first Doctor, and obviously he's where I started off with the New Who. Now, mind you, I'm coming from the New Who, Matt Smith more particularly, who I was watching most recently, considering he's getting his episodes out fairly well, and it is 4/28th. I really do need to get around to actually watching his most recent episode, Journey to the Center of the TARDIS. Looking forward to that one, to be honest. Anyway, I digress. Back to William Hartnell. I originally started watching it, and I've been wanting to, but I never was able to really get a hold of anything, to be honest. So I finally managed to get a hold of, in Gwatch, all season 1, 2, season 3, and a good portion of season 4. But I haven't gotten through all of the second Doctor, so we'll leave that for the next video, if I ever get around to doing it. I'm kind of sketchy on this whole thing. Anyway, first opening scene, we finally managed to get to the first Doctor in the sense that we are introduced to our two characters who will be joining the Doctor on his shenanigans. The two teachers named Barbara and Ian. And when I first got introduced to them, I was kind of like, they're teachers. Okay, anything else we need to know about them? We don't really find out a whole lot about them, to be honest, other than the fact that they're teachers and incredibly smart. And I guess that kind of makes sense, considering it was a TV show dedicated to children back in the day to educate them on, science and history. Which is kind of surprising how far from that original idea they've gotten with the New Who series, considering, what they deal with on a regular basis isn't exactly even theoretical science in some cases, like the great sonic screwdriver, which I have to admit has got to be one of my new favorite toys. That and the scarf, which was recently made by my fiance. Getting off topic, but if she wants to, she can come over here and say hi to the camera for, making me this nice little prop toy of mine that I am absolutely in love with, even though I haven't really seen too much of the Fourth Doctor, but I've seen enough to know he is highly entertaining. And, of course, she is also responsible for making my background prop. Say hello, Mr. Dalek. That's my Dalek. You don't talk much, mainly because I can't do the exterminate voice very well, and my audio editing for now is piss poor, as you can tell. Anyway, my fiancée is over there looking at me, holding her hand over her mouth and face, trying her best to suppress a very entertaining laugh. You really should see it, but sadly I'm using a laptop camera, and I do not have the ability to turn it over fast enough to actually give you a good shot. But considering she's holding it for quite some time, I might be able to get away with it. Anyway, I don't think she's moving over here, so I do have a very bad habit of not staying on topic. William Hartnell. We're staying with him now. No sonic screwdriver. I was kind of bummed, but to be honest, I think it actually made him a better Doctor for it, not having an all-encompassing Deus Ex Machina. Yes, even I, with all of my love of New Who, do find the sonic screwdriver to be a little overpowered, in my personal opinion. But you see him grumpy, not dismissive, and I have to admit, he doesn't seem to be the most likable of individuals when you first actually meet him. In fact, throughout the entire course of his run, he didn't actually seem all that nice. Though, if we're talking just about William Hartnell, I didn't really much care for him, to be honest, when I first started watching him, but he does have his shining moments where we finally get to see that crafty persona that he is invented for himself, because he ended up going around. He was willing to smash a caveman's head in with a rock because they were slowing him down, willing to throw both of his companions, Ian and Barbara, out of the TARDIS because he was afraid they were trying to steal it or something like that. And he ends up completely and totally sabotaging his own TARDIS by removing the mercury tube in order to go out and take a look at a new planet that he's discovered. I have to admit, he is not exactly the David Tennant we've all come to know and love. But he does finally get his moment when they go back to the French Revolution, and he ends up using a coin, I believe it's a coin, I think it's a coin, in order to trick this one guy into digging the hole so he could bash him over the head and get away, which I have to admit was extensively clever on his part. And after that, I really did warm up to him as a Doctor and as to an individual. It really started to show that the Doctor was not, just there to be rescued and saved and to explain everything, that he was in fact capable of taking a proactive approach. I have to admit, it was fairly nice to actually see that scene, and it was relatively refreshing. Let's see here. Out of the two companions, Barbara and Ian, they both actually got to shine and bring up a lot of philosophical questions that the Doctor would, of course, explain to them in the sense of the Aztecs, which has got to be one of my more favorite miniseries, miniature little episode thingies, simply for the very fact that we get to see Ian take out an Aztec with nothing more than his thumb, which I thought was pretty awesome. And of course we get Barbara's little speech of what's the point of traveling through time if we can't really change anything, and that she destroying that one guy's faith, and it meant sometimes it brings up the question that maybe sometimes the needs of the few are more important than the needs of the many. Something that the Matt Smith could probably do a thing or two with, meddling with things. But, TV show, take what you can get. Anyway, we get to see Barbara, Ian, and Susan and the Doctor get to travel around for quite a few adventures until we finally get to the Dalek invasion, which I have to admit was fairly entertaining and fairly good to see the Doctor's infamous enemies once again. Please don't exterminate me. Anyway, it was nice to see them again, and we finally leave the first official companion of Susan, who gets to finally take a step back and apparently fell in love with someone for the course of the story. And we get the famous world famous Hartnell speech, and eventually move on with just the Doctor, Ian, and Barbara, continuing on through their story. And let's see here. I'm going off of memory here, so I'm only remembering things that really stuck out for me in the William Hartnell era. Eventually, we get to run into another new companion on a foreign planet that is Steven. I think this was the one where they were getting chased around by the Daleks in the time-traveling machine. Yes, Daleks actually do have a time-traveling machine. Wonder why that's never actually brought back up. Anyway. Finally get to meet Steven, and he is also a fairly entertaining and interesting character. And we eventually come to the conclusion where they get the new spaceship, and Ian and Barbara are like, we want to go home. And it's kind of interesting, is the course of their entire run, and that was what they were trying to do. They wanted to go home, despite how stand-up they were and getting things taken care of, and getting the Doctor out of his little situations alive. No small part in thanks to himself. And I have to admit, it was it was fairly sad to actually watch them go. Not as sad as watching Susan go, because William Hartnell's little speech there kind of choked me up a little bit. But to be honest, I didn't much care for her character too much. She didn't do a whole lot, which was kind of sad, really, because she being a supposed Time Lord, whether or not that's confirmed, I think she is a Time Lord. I think I saw like something out of a comic book or something like that. That yeah, she's in fact a Time Lord. Anyway, we are then stuck with just the Doctor and I believe Stephen. If there was another companion during the time, I'm afraid I've forgotten. Eventually, we do come across, I think it's another companion by the name of Dodo, who, Dodo was a bit of a troublemaker. She gets all sorts of problems involved. Uh, Spreading the illness on the spaceship. Let's see here. Not seemingly. I don't think she really picked up that Steven was in trouble with the gunfighters episode, which was a very good western. All things considered, was very entertaining. I have to admit, I was having a bit difficulty trying to figure out who in fact I was supposed to be rooting for throughout the course of the story, since almost everybody seemed to be a bit of a douche. But yeah, I digress. It was fairly entertaining, and as a person who is actually a big fan of like old westerns, well, not big fan, but I do actually watch them. It was a fairly good story. And then another really fun one was the Celestial Toymaker. Again, showing that Dodo can be a bit of a dodo. I have to admit, eventually we lost Steven, but I can't remember exactly where he actually left off, to be honest. Kind of depressing. I do remember, though, that he eventually, it was just down to, the Doctor and Dodo, which was kind of interesting, really, that it's like we literally, Dodo was basically the stand-in. He even said that he looked kind of like Susan. And, oh crap, I just remembered another companion. Oh, the first official death of a companion, I cannot remember her name, but I do know she came after the incidents of Troy that the Doctor got involved with, and she ended up sacrificing herself to try and escape the Daleks. She did not stick around for very long, sadly. Which, surprisingly enough, nobody really goes back to that death. I think it was rather inconsequential, I guess, because I've never really heard anyone talking about it over the course of the series. Just like the Doctor's ability and desire to actually throw people out of the TARDIS or kill them outright if it was basically a very threatening his own existence. Now, Doctor really did enjoy living, considering that he was supposedly 439 years old when he originally started off. Not bad, considering the actor's only 51. It's definite casting there, to be honest. And anyway, we finally actually get to see the Doctor really stretch out in the last episode with Dodo. She didn't really hang around too much, but we get to see the Doctor taking charge, and it has to have one of my favorite moments of the first Doctor's initial run. Is he's literally looking at this giant, really poorly made construct of this giant killer robot. And we see all of these military men, they're all running away, and everyone's just in panic and running away, and yet the first Doctor grabs onto his coat like this, and he looks at that and he just sort of walks forward like, yeah, I'm going to destroy you. And lo and behold, he does. It was an amazingly, incredibly epic moment for the first Doctor. I really enjoyed seeing him go from, being the guy who needed to be saved and rescued from the Daleks during his initial run with them, to being the guy who has the plan and has the solution, which is what he eventually becomes to incorporate almost all the time in the new Doctor Who series. I have to admit that he was an amazing... He had some amazing moments. I have to admit, it was a little difficult to get through with him, but he was a crafty guy despite his old age. And then, of course, we get two more new companions, which eventually would run us into the final nice little serial with him, I think. No, I believe he had two adventures with him. Ah, crap. I'm having a difficult time remembering exactly what's going on. I do know though he finally ended during the fourth season with the 10th planet, in the initial appearance of the Cybermen, which, wow, the differences between the New Who series and the Cybermen. Those Cybermen were creepy, but they weren't all that scary. I have to admit, I'm very much more intimidated and terrified than of the new Cybermen that got introduced during David Tennant's run. I have to admit, I know that's probably gonna piss a couple of people off, but I don't know. They just didn't look all that scary to me. Let's see here. Some of the more interesting moments, I have to admit, is that Dodo just didn't show up back to the TARDIS. I was always kind of curious as to what the reason was behind that. They never really gave an excuse, and the Doctor never really went back, and she was legitimately seemingly forgotten, all things considered. I was listening to a podcast of the different Doctors, and Uncle Yo, who I actually find is a very entertaining comedian, actually made this nice little mistake and actually said it was Susan, who was in the episode of The Gunslingers, and I was like, no, that was Dodo. I'm probably only remembering that because I just actually watched through that series error, and I was kind of like, no, that was Dodo. Susan left before Barbara and Ian. I have to admit, though, overall, it was fairly good. It was entertaining in some parts. I have to admit, some pieces I didn't much care for. The Marco Polo part was not a very fun one to get through. I ended up kind of just sort of listening to that one, not really paying too much attention to actually what was going on, and which was kind of terrible of me in all extensive regards. And then there was the Roman, the one where they actually went back to ancient Rome, which was actually fairly good. Actually seeing Ian going from all these different little places and stuff like that after being captured, and Barbara's attempted escape, and who was the companion that was with them? Yeah, after they ended up getting Susan, there was another female companion that they ended up running into, and she carried over with Steven, and then she left, and then you got Dodo and Steven, and then Steven left, then Dodo left, and then those two companions whose names always seem to slip my mind, eventually joined the Doctor, and they just recently left for me during the episode with the airport. Yeah. Not really talking about Doctor Who, but they are technically the first Doctor's companions, and it's kind of those were a pair of interesting ones because they ended up getting involved with the Doctor, not because they were curious or anything like that, but just simply because they wanted to return the TARDIS key from Dodo. Still hung up on that, to be honest. If I remember correctly, almost all of the other companions of the first Doctor got some semblance of a set-off, but Dodo didn't even get any screen time. Her last technical adventure with the Doctor was mostly just the Doctor taking care of problems, and she got hypnotized. Let's see here. Hypnotized, kidnapped, starts plague, gets tricked by the man-child on the Celestial Toymaker. I have to admit, I can see why Dodo is kind of forgettable and not very well liked. She did cause a lot of the problems that the Doctor and Steven had to eventually solve, or just the Doctor himself. Which, I have to admit, the whole reason of her even being brought on was because, hey, it looks kind of like my, granddaughter. And I loved Steven's reaction. He's like, I never met your granddaughter. And he's like, oh, yeah, quite right. I have to admit, it was Steven's initial run on there. He didn't really feel like he was his own character, more like he was taking the place of Barbara or Ian because during some of the writing moments. But eventually he became a very enjoyable character to watch. My favorite episode with him being in it was, of course, the Celestial Toymaker, which has got to be one of my more entertaining ones, if nothing more for the fact that I hated that jerk that was in the very last part of Barbara, I mean, not Barbara, but Steven and Dodo's initial episode. Not to mention, it was fairly cool to actually see his cowboy getup, which was very sparkly and very stylish, so to speak. Not anything to be actually set with the actual tone, with the actual cowboys who sort of dressed at least somewhat moderately, but who actually knows? I don't even know what they actually look like, to be honest. But that's just based off of what I've seen. All right. Let's see here. How much time do I actually have this whole thing going on for? I really don't know what my time limit is. I don't have a nice little time doohickey to actually show me what's going on. Maybe I should have a watch or become a time lord, whichever one comes first. Sadly, it's probably going to be the watch. Anyway, that's pretty much everything on William Hartnell that I really felt came back to me. I might come back and actually talk a little bit more about the First Doctor. I've recently managed to get a hold of some of the nice little audiobooks, so hopefully I might actually find a couple of stories about him in there. But other than that, that's pretty much it for the First Doctor. It's going to probably be a little while before I start talking about Patrick, since I think, I'm not 100% certain, that I'm on the 4th season or the 5th season. I'm not 100% certain. But overall, my impressions with him are fairly good, just like my impressions with the 4th Doctor. I actually skipped ahead a little bit when I was watching the First Doctor, because he was kind of boring me a little bit. Blasphemy. I'm talking bad about old Who. I have to admit, I did actually watch quite a bit of him as well, and very positive from seeing him. I can actually see why a lot of people really liked him. He was definitely an interesting individual. Anyway, that's pretty much all I've got to say. I'm going to wrap this up fairly well, and be sure to check out my YouTube page, look at some of my other stuff, and, hope I entertained you at least a little bit.